This week, we talked to a woman who's taken her bike through all sorts of adventures, from having the frame fixed to taking it in cyclocross races with the rack still on it. Take a listen.
First of all, is this your bike? And can you tell me about it?
Yeah, this is my bike. I like to call it my bike now. And it is originally a 2017 Surly Straggler with 650B wheels. As you might be able to tell, it doesn't have anything that would say that it's a Surly. But yeah, I love my bike. It came to me, it was blueberry muffin top, so it was like a dark blue with glitter, which is why I picked it. I was looking for something. I needed to do the land run gravel ride in Oklahoma, and I was like, someone was like, you need to get a different bike, and I wanted a new bike anyway. So I think this is the last new bike I've ever bought, and it's, knock on wood, hopefully gonna be my forever bike. Like, long story short, it's been through a lot. It's been in a lot of places. I've done races on it. I've ridden down Highway 1 in California on it. I've ridden it through the Badlands. I've taken it across the country for work. But one day I was going down the I-5 in Seattle, or towards Seattle, and someone rear-ended me, and my bike was on my bike rack. Actually, two bikes were on my bike rack, and I was like, oh no. But I looked at it, and in my adrenaline haze, thought, oh, it's totally fine. And by the time was going south, I kept being like, it's totally fine, it just needs a new wheel, it just needs to do this. I took it to this bike shop in Oakland, and they're like, no, your frame is totally messed up. And I immediately burst into tears. I was so sad. And the dude was like, you might be able to find somebody who can bend it back into shape. And I was like, okay. So I brought it all the way back across the country from California. I left it in where I was staying at the time. And then I brought it to Blue City in Bridgeport. Owen is a mastermind, which is why everyone goes to him. And he replaced my chainstay. You can't see it, it's on the other side, but it was bent. He took it out, and the best part about steel bikes is you can fix them. You don't have to throw them away. And I really believe I don't like throwing things away. I love this bike. And then I rode it around, and finally, because the chainstay was not painted, it got kind of wacky, and I was tired of, I don't know, I went down to Chicago Heights where they could powder coat it, and the dude was like, I thought you said blue, so he showed me all these blues, and then I was like, can you show me something in gray or silver? And that's what I did, and I love it. And I think the only things on this bike that are original is the frame and the brakes. The frame and the brakes are the only thing left. Everything else has been replaced, has been given to me, and it survives so much, so here's hoping it survives.
That's awesome.
Thank
that
you.
is a very custom bike.
It is. It started off in, it's just a bike. Lots of people have Stragglers. Lots of people complain about them. But now it's mine, and, I've had knock on wood, I've had a lot of bikes stolen, so here's hoping lucky number 7 makes it through.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's super cool. And how long have you been biking, and how did you get into it?
Yeah. I think there are a lot of people, if they are lucky, I grew up biking. One of my favorite bikes, I think, we got it at a garage sale, or somebody hand me down as a Schwinn Stingray. And my dad and I stripped it, painted it blue, and then as a banana seat, we took some jeans and we put a denim banana seat on it. I love that bike. I think it was a different time, and I lived in Arlington Heights, and there were a lot of bike lanes, but I just remember riding. You could just go anywhere when you were in the 90s. So I would pick up a friend and throw him on the back of the banana seat and go to the pool, or take my brother. So I grew up doing it. I would ride my bike to school. I'd ride my bike to high school when I didn't have a car. And then around the time I was in college, I was on the West Coast for college, but I came back to work in the summers. And all my friends started getting into bikes, I think, because, I don't know, it's just the thing you did in your 20s. And so I kind of was like, okay, would put a bike on the Metro train and kind of ride around. We'd ride around from Pilsen to the movies. And then in 2009, I finally moved back here. And in 2010, like, it was a pretty bad time in the economy, and I was pretty broke. I lived in Pilsen, and I had this single-speed Schwinn conversion, also a very good bike, and I just started riding around. I didn't have a lot to do, and I was pretty broke, and so I would just leave. And this was I didn't have a smartphone, there's no green Google Maps, and so I just rode around. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew that, like, if I got somewhere, like, there would probably be a bus. There would be a train, and I would be okay. And I don't know. First I was like, okay, I'll go 10 miles, and I'll go 20 miles. And then one day I was, like, all the way in Wolf Lake, and I thought, like, where am I? What has happened to me? And then I just didn't stop. I really liked it. I liked riding to work. I met a bunch of people, and, like, yeah, I started trying everything, and I did not stop. So I guess as an adult, 15 years. Good job, me.
That's awesome. And what do you use your bike for? You know, it's like kind of practical. I see a cargo rack, but it also, I feel like some people might think it's a racing bike. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, what is my bike like? This bike, God bless it, will do, I think, sort of do it all. That's why I bought it. And because it was blue and sparkly, and because it fits me. It's a 50-centimeter internet. You're gonna be like, that person is too short for it. Well, you are wrong. So ride what you like. Yeah, I bought it because, again, there's some really cool people in Chicago. Some of them still live here, and they were all gonna do this 100-mile gravel race event in Stillwater, Oklahoma, and they just convinced me. They were like, you should just do it. I knew them through other things, and I was like, okay. My mom is from Oklahoma, and so I had this Jameis Aurora that I used as just all-around bike. I took a tour on it through the Blue Ridge, and I did a bunch of local gravel events on it. But I thought to myself, like, okay, probably if you want to keep doing this, and also if you want to do other things, like, let's it's time for a different bike. So I bought it because gravel and commuting, and I've also I've commuted on it. I lived in Minneapolis at the time. I did a lot of riding there. Did 110 because someone got lost miles on it in Oklahoma, which was pretty fun. So I go on bike tour or bike trips or bike packing, I guess. I don't really bike pack. We've ridden around the Badlands. We rode from Portland from Eugene to Oakland with some train travel. And I've done some cyclocross races on it, but I refuse to, like, deal with it. So I've left the rack on it multiple times, and people will yell. I don't really race anymore, but people will be like, is that a rack? And then I'm like, yeah, of course it's a rack. What else would it be? And then I've also, honestly, like, it takes single track pretty well. I wouldn't recommend, I mean, you can't, I don't know, people call things under biking, but it's really fun to ride around on, like, low-key trails, and now I just ride it everywhere. And yes, I have this rack. I have this fancy saddle that I bought used on eBay. Shout out to eBay. And it goes everywhere. It is my everything bike. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
Thanks.
That's super cool. And what do you like about biking in Chicago in particular?
Oh, man. I love biking in Chicago. I've, again, been a lot of places, ridden a lot of places, and for my money, I think Chicago is great. We are really lucky in a lot of ways. And I think my favorite part is that Chicago is so big, and there's so many different areas and different people that, again, if you just kind of say, I'm just gonna ride, I'm gonna go in a direction, you will just see and experience, like, so many different things. I know, we're not backed up to mountains, and I think some people really struggle with that. They want elevation, but there is a lot of incredible nature here. So I'm a huge fan and, like, booster of Big Marsh Park, and I've made some cool videos. And, if you've never been to Big Marsh Park, like, there is Also, like, I live here. I live where there's a brewery and also Bubbly Creek and also trucks. And I ride around here. But Big Marsh is one of those places you will never be anywhere like that. I've been all over the country doing bike stuff, and you will never see anything like it. And I just think that's amazing. You know, I know that things could be better, but the reality is like, we have an incredible way to get around. We have transit. If you want to go bike camping, there's like accessible ways to do that. There's all kinds of different people. And also, I just love it. Like, I just like to go places, and I rarely feel worse after I do it. And you just feel really cool. Like, Chicago is cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know, you mentioned things could be better. What do you dislike about biking in Chicago? What do you feel like could be improved?
Yes. I thought about this a lot because I think I unfortunately have a lot of takes. I've been around a lot of bike stuff. But, you know, the reality is so we're at 36 right now. And one of my favorite routes is like, in total, if you do it, like 60 miles. And I know it because in 2014, I was volunteering for Active Transportation Alliance, and I route marked it. So it's like memorized in my brain. It's one of my favorite routes. If you start from here, you will cross 35th, which kind of sucks, and then go down through the yards, which is funny. Also really cool. If you've never ridden around the stockyards, you should do that. But by the time you get to back of the yards, if you would like to get farther south or east or west, you're out of luck. And in Chicago, we have, like, the reality is, like most other places, that people who live in disenfranchised places don't get the same things as other people who do. Mm-hmm. And that's really hard. If there's a lot of truck traffic, which there is, riding from like 47th to a long way, and you can't go east or west because like Halstead's all the way over here, Ashland is a no-fly zone, Damon doesn't start up again until like Garfield, Western no way, California maybe. Mm-hmm. Like, that's really hard. And I understand so much, like, people want better for themselves, and I understand that. But we live in a really big city, and your neighbors are not just people like you and people who live near you. You know, transit justice is about an equity. It's that like baseball drawing. So for bikes, like, people who live in Sherman Park, people who live in West Englewood, people who live in Auburn Gresham, like, they need to come up here. And there's a lot of people over here who have, like, the reality is like, lots of the north side, it could be better. I understand that. But the infrastructure there, if I took you riding my favorite route from here to Dan Ryan Woods where the Major Taylor Trail starts, it's a lot. Like, mm-hmm. And that's really sad. And I kind of just wish more people rode around on the south and the west sides. And I wish that they would advocate for the same things that they have for themselves, because mm-hmm. we're all neighbors, and kids and adults and everyone, everywhere, deserves the same thing as people in other places. And so that's, I think, what I hope, but I think that's just an issue, you know? Like, we live in a city that a lot of people sort of take it on the chin so that other people have easier lives. Like, the reason it's so hard to get through there is because there's a bunch of intermodal sites. There's huge train yards. And so it's really hard to, like, go around them. But those train yards are why, like, stuff comes here. Stuff like bikes, mm-hmm. stuff like food. And so, you know, people, you know, like, it's an issue of justice. And so I hope we all remember that and keep perspective and remember, like, we should think of everybody in the city. Yeah. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. Yeah. That's really beautiful. Let me ask, like, maybe one or two more questions here. Yeah, I mean, you're in a part of the city that, you know, there aren't maybe as many people biking. So I'm sure there are times you talk to people who maybe haven't biked before or aren't biking. What do you think people who don't bike might misunderstand about people who choose to bike, or just the experience of biking around Chicago?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. You know, I think because it's funny, I think people do bike, but they might just bike in a different way. So for example, in a few weeks, the 12th Ward is going to have the Brighton Park bike ride with the Southwest Collective. And so the reality is like a lot of those people probably bike or want to bike, but they bike, recreationally around parks, on trails. And so I do think there is this notion of, biking as recreation, which is fine, right? Like everybody bikes differently, and bikes are fine. However you want to bike is fine. But I also think that trying to sort of get the understanding of like, understanding that, I think I'm trying to think of a way to say like that the more access we have to active transit and the more access we have to safe things, especially I think for young people, I think young people, we see like Fixie Kids and there's like people in co-ops, like when do you lose that? You lose that maybe a little bit more when it seems like, okay, well, my only alternative is to like drive somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And talking to people and being like, well, if you didn't, like, what would you need to not feel like you had to drive somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
to not feel like you had to spend money on a car? Like, because cars are really necessary for a lot of people. Also, like, I own a car. Cars are okay sometimes. And I think really just like trying to have this conversation with each other of like, well, why do you do this? And like, what do you have? And like, well, what would you need? What would you need to feel safe? What would you need to do this? What would you need to rely on it? Like being able to have those conversations, because I don't know. I think in general, like people aren't always opposed to bikes. I've not really met a ton of haters about it, but I also am really willing to have those conversations and like also just being like, okay, like realistically, it's true. I am honest with people. It is tough to ride in some places, and I remember that and they remember that, and I don't know. I think just having a conversation, I guess, about it is something that I think you start from.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Well, I think those are all the questions I have. So
Cool.
Is there anything else that you want to mention about your biking experience or you want to tell the people?
That I want to tell the people. A lot of my friends know I have too many spicy takes. I think my main thing for everyone is like run what you brung. It's a really good motto, which means just like start where you are, and the internet is awesome and a cool tool, and also like don't let the internet of bikes make you feel like you don't belong or you can't have it. Like there's all kinds of people. I've met really cool people in bikes. But I ride my bike for me. I like to ride alone, and it's okay. Like, it's okay to just bike how you like. Mm-hmm. It's okay to run what you brung and enjoy it. And just, if whatever you do, that's enough. And think about your neighbors. Remember your neighbors and go riding on the south and the west side because it's awesome. And you will see and feel, and it will be great.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching that interview. Subscribe to see more conversations with Chicagoans biking around their city, dropping every other week.